The ball arcs into the box and two players rise for it. Only one will get up on his own. The collision is so quiet on the broadcast that you almost miss it, until the players around him start frantically waving for the medics. According to the club's later statement, Raul Jimenez had fractured his skull. How does a man come back from the edge of everything? This is the story of Mexico's talisman and a survivor. He was born on the 5th of May 1991 in Tepeji del Rio, a small town in the state of Hidalgo, Mexico. The son of a family that loved its football, Raul grew up kicking a ball in the streets and the dusty pitches of central Mexico. As a teenager, he found his way into the youth ranks of Club America, the biggest, most demanding club in the country. The pressure there was a furnace, and it forged him. By 2011, at just 20 years old, he made his professional debut for America. A tall, raw striker, all elbows and ambition, learning to lead a line. He was 20 years old when he stepped into Mexico's most watched team. The early days weren't an overnight explosion. He worked at the small things, the hold-up play, the runs, the timing. The kind of details that don't trend, but build a career. Then came the moment that put his name on the map. 2013. A cross hangs in the air, and Raul Jimenez throws himself backwards into an overhead bicycle kick, and the ball flies into the net. It was the kind of goal you replay just to be sure it was real. It won the CONCACAF Goal of the Year for 2013. Suddenly, the kid from Tepeji wasn't a prospect anymore. He was a name. The goals kept coming for club and country, and the bigger leagues of Europe started to take notice. In 2014, the move came. Atletico Madrid, reigning champions of Spain, one of the most ruthless clubs in Europe. But under Diego Simeone, minutes were rare. In a side built on iron and rotation, Raul spent more time watching than playing. It would have been easy to drift, to become another talented forward swallowed by a giant. Instead, he asked the hard question: where do I actually get to play? The answer was Lisbon, Benfica, and the rebuild of Raul Jimenez began. In Portugal, he found his feet again, the runs sharper, the finishing colder, the confidence flooding back. He linked play, he pressed, he scored, and he won. 2 Primeira Liga titles came with Benfica, 2 league titles in Portugal. The quiet spell in Madrid was behind him. He tested himself in the Champions League against Europe's best and proved he belonged on that stage. And then came the move that made him a star. In 2018, Wolverhampton Wanderers, newly promoted, hungry, ambitious, brought Raul Jimenez to the Premier League. And he was perfect for them. The intelligence, the strength, the link-up play. The whole game finally clicked at Molineux. The fans adored him. The goals came with a swagger, and his masked celebration became a Molineux ritual. He fired Wolves into Europe and threw a thrilling Europa League run, terrorizing defenders across the continent. Across all competitions in the 2019-20 campaign, he hit 27 goals, among the best strikers in England. He wasn't just a finisher. He was the axis the whole team turned on, back to goal, holding off centre-backs, slipping runners through. And for Mexico, he was now the man. El Tri's number 9, their talisman, the one they looked to when it mattered. He had everything in front of him. And then, in the 5th minute of a game in London, everything stopped. The 29th of November 2020, the Emirates Stadium. A corner swings into the box. Raul rises for it, and so does David Luiz, and their heads collide with a force you could feel through the screen. The game stopped. Medics rushed on. He was given oxygen and carried off on a stretcher, taken straight to hospital. Wolves later confirmed that Raul had suffered a fractured skull and had undergone surgery that night. It was, by every account, a life-threatening injury. For a time, football was the very last thing that mattered. His manager, Nuno Espirito Santo, told the press that the club's first and only thought was for Raul as a person and for his family. He spent days under close observation. The surgery had been successful, but the road back would be measured in months, not weeks. 9 months. That's how long Raul Jimenez would be away from the game that nearly took everything. And nobody knew, in those first weeks, whether he would ever play professional football again, let alone head a ball. What got him through, by his own account, was his family, and a quiet, stubborn refusal to let this be the end of his story. And slowly, the comeback began. When he returned to training, he wore a protective headguard, a padded band around his skull, the most visible sign of what he had survived. In the summer of 2021, almost 9 months after that night in London, Raul Jimenez walked back onto a football pitch. The first headers must have taken a courage most of us will never have to find. He went up for them anyway. And then he scored again. The striker who had fractured his skull, back doing the one thing he was born to do. For everyone who had feared the worst that November night, that goal meant far more than 3 points. It meant he was still here. The road back wasn't smooth. The goals came slower than before, the rhythm harder to find. A body and a mind both relearning trust. But he kept leading the line, kept doing the unglamorous work, the holds, the flicks, the runs that dragged defenders away. In 2023, a new chapter, a move across to Fulham, a fresh start, a chance to rebuild his goal tally once more. And at Fulham, the old instincts came roaring back. The finishing sharpened, the confidence returned. The movement off the shoulder, the cleverness in tight spaces, the player Europe had fallen for was still in there. And in 2024, he reached a milestone that put him in rare company. His 100th goal for European clubs. 100 across Spain, Portugal and England. According to the records, only the third Mexican ever to reach 100 club goals in Europe, behind only the legends Hugo Sanchez and Javier Chicharito Hernandez. For a man who'd had his skull rebuilt, that list reads like a miracle. And through it all, he remained Mexico's man, climbing the country's all-time scoring charts, the steady heartbeat of El Tri. He carried that number 9 through World Cup after World Cup, the weight of a nation's hopes sitting squarely on his shoulders. Which brings us to the moment this whole story had been building toward. 2026. The World Cup comes to Mexico, the United States and Canada, and for Raul Jimenez, it comes home. Mexico's opening game, South Africa the opponent, a home crowd roaring and the talisman leading the line one more time. And it's Raul Jimenez who scores the opening goal of the home World Cup, the ball in the net, the stadium shaking. Think about everything packed into that single celebration. The bicycle kick, Madrid, Lisbon, Molineux, the 5th minute at the Emirates, the headguard, all of it, leading here. The man who, in 2020, the world feared might never play again, scoring the first goal of a World Cup in his own country. So what does Raul Jimenez mean? On the pitch, he's one of Mexico's greatest ever goal scorers, a complete centre-forward who could finish, hold, link and lead. But the numbers aren't really the point. The point is what it took to get them. He came back to head a football after a fractured skull. That headguard wasn't a weakness on show. It was a badge of how far he'd come, worn in front of millions every single week. For every kid in Tepeji, in Hidalgo, across Mexico, he's proof that the bicycle kick wonder and the comeback survivor can be the same man. Talent gets you to the top, but what Raul Jimenez showed the world is something rarer, what it takes to climb back. From a small town in Hidalgo to the edge of everything and back into the light. A striker, a talisman, a survivor. If this story stayed with you, Subscribe to Beyond the Boots for more. The boots tell the story. We just follow the footsteps.